Download the AllStar app. Make your picks for UFC fights, challenge your friends, level up and win prizes. Link in description. Get it now.
All right, Cody. Last weekend, man, there was a big middleweight fight in the main event, and there's a lot of
Oh
controversy
yeah.
about this, saying that it was an early stoppage. What'd you think?
As a fighter, I if I was Jared, I would be pissed, and if I was Nasruddin, I'd be freaking pumped, right? Like, so I get it. And I think it was an early stoppage, but I also think Jared did, like, if you go back and watch, he turned his back like 3 times, which doesn't necessarily mean he wasn't intelligently defending himself. It's just not something you typically see. So as a ref, you're like, well, is he there? Like, you don't turn your back in a fight. They tell you that in the back. So it's a tough one because I do feel like it was an early stoppage, but I also could see why it was made. And it's tough also. If Nasruddin's winning that whole fight, I think there's a lot less people that are worried about it. But since it was a close fight, he was down on scorecards. I think that plays a role in it as well. And maybe it shouldn't, but it does. And so I get why people are upset. I had to catch it on the replay. I was with my boy Dustin in the back,
Yeah,
but from what I saw and then what I heard from most people live, it was definitely controversial for sure.
yeah, and I think the biggest, well, the record is important, and plus they're both guys in the top 15, which means that this has a significance in the division, but also the money involved. I don't think that people don't talk about that.
Oh yeah.
What I mean? That's a huge factor, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's like when you see these robberies, it sounds good for everyone to be like, man, he got robbed, but it doesn't help his bank account. You're getting half your pay, and um, for Jared, it was probably a lot more money than that. You missed out on half your pay, but had he won that fight, good chance that he's fighting for the belt next. Um, so the money that he would have got from that fight as well, kind of goes out the window, and so those are things that make it sting a little bit more. I do agree with Jared. He said, let's just run it back. I don't see why you don't. The middleweight's kind of crowded at the top. You got Shemaev and Whitaker fighting. You would imagine the winner of that, especially if it's Shemaev, is going to get the next shot. You got Strickland. You got Izzy. Those guys probably aren't going to fight each other again unless it's for the belt. So it makes sense to me to run that fight back. I don't feel like there's Paulo Costa just fought. He's not going to be fighting anytime soon. It makes sense. So I wouldn't mind seeing him running that one again.
But you know what? I doubt the UFC runs it back. You know how they are.
Oh no, they
Yeah.
won't. Yeah, they won't. I'll tell you what though, that Imavov man, he might be like stylistically watching him fight. He might be one of my favorite fighters, man. He is super dynamic on the feet, and I feel like he has good wrestling, and I feel like he's really fun to watch. So I wouldn't be surprised, the UFC pushes him pretty quick.
Yeah, and he's getting better too. I mean, maybe we've seen the best
Oh
of
yeah,
Jared, but that guy, he's younger. He's getting better. We'll see what they do with him.
yeah,
Let's get to you, man.
for sure.
You already fought this year. Like, what was that whole experience
Yeah,
like, man? UFC 300. It was, it was.
it was cool. It was cool, man. It was a lot, but it was cool. It was a lot of media, a lot of attention, obviously, good and bad. Um, it's weird, I lost that fight, and I probably gained more fans than I had before off of wins and stuff, which I think is silly and kind of weird. But I had some opportunities in there. I feel like I got a little bit greedy as far as the fight goes. Um, didn't necessarily really stick to the game plan. Was just more so like, all right, well, if this dude beats me, he's gonna have to really take me out. And I feel like I mean, of course, there's like you look back on and be like, man, I wish I would have done this. It was hard to do. I was fighting on instinct, which is what you're coached to do, and I just made some decisions that were a little bit questionable. If I go back and could do the fight again, obviously I would change them a little bit, but you can't do that. But it was cool, man. It was cool to be a part of. Forever, I'll be a part of UFC 300. Um, yeah, it'd be interesting to see what they do with Bo. I don't really think you can give him a huge jump in competition after that fight. Uh, like I don't, they might, but I don't see them pumping him to the top 10 or top 15. I feel like they'll give him another guy that's kind of around where I'm at, maybe a little bit of a bump, but I could see him giving him like a Gerald Mershard or a guy like that next. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with him.
Do you think they should do that? Do you think they should take it slower for him, or do you think like they should just push him. You know what I mean? Like, yo, if you're that good, let's see what you can do.
Yeah, I feel like he's very good at what he's good at, right? Like he's a specialist for sure, man. His wrestling top notch. His ground control was really, really good. I didn't feel like he was super strong. I just felt like he would beat me to every position, right? And he had really good awareness of where he was on the ground. Obviously, I feel like I knew that going into the fight. He's very well versed in the grappling arts. But he has a long way to go on the feet, and that's just the facts. And it's not even that he's not good on the feet. It's just he's not comfortable on the feet yet. And I feel like the more time you give him, the better his striking will be. He already obviously has power. Um, but I think he needs a little more time to get comfortable. I think he needs a little more time to get comfortable on the feet because, he beat me, he submitted me, all the props in the world to the dude. He's a beast. He's gonna be a beast. Uh, but that kid did not. He didn't want to be on the feet with me. And I'm not saying I'm the best striker in the UFC. I'm pretty. I think I'm a high level striker, but there's guys that are better than me. So to push him against somebody like that, I think is maybe not a great choice. I saw that Bruno for Hera kid called him out. I wouldn't. I think that would make sense. They're both kind of early in their career. Both have some big wins. That kid's explosive and dangerous. You know, like I said, it maybe is a little step up for me. People might see it as, but it's not so big a step that he couldn't compete there. And so I do think you slow play it a little bit, and it's not even really slow playing it. I mean, he's only 6-0, right? Like you can't. The fact that he's even in the UFC at 6-0 is crazy. He's 3 fight deep is crazy. Like everybody wants to see him fight a top 10 dude, and part of that's on him because he's like I should fight these guys. I should fight these guys. But the other part of it is, he's got to sell himself. He's got to build his brand, and that's part of it. And people need to realize that. I might say I want to fight King Kong, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what I want or think is best, right? Like that, I'm just selling myself as the next, pound for pound number one, which is what he's doing. So, I think you kind of give him a linear step, maybe a little bit of a step up in people's eyes, but I don't think you bump him top 15. Like I think Anthony Hernandez would be a terrible fight for him. At this point, and Fluffy's got really good striking, an amazing gas tank. He's got pretty good wrestling, and his ground game is solid. So I think that might be stretching it a little bit. Not that he couldn't win that fight, he definitely could. But the other thing is like, do you like how is he going to win the fight, right? He's going to hold him down for 15 minutes and people aren't going to be excited to watch him anymore. So it's like let him get comfortable in certain areas that he doesn't have the cage time in, and then maybe he goes starts finishing all the rest of these dudes like he's been doing, and then you can kind of build a storyline. Then you can kind of jump him. I think he probably needs two or three more outside the top 15, maybe two. That put him at 8-0, and then then start bumping him because then it's only two or three. Once you're in the top 15, it's two or three. You're fighting for a title. So he'd be 10-0 fighting for a title potentially. That's pretty crazy, with very little amateur experience. So yeah, I don't have a problem with slow playing him a little bit. And I think he would want that too. He might not say that, but I think he would want that too.
Yeah, every fight counts, man. Every fight's important, especially with the spotlight from so early on. You didn't have many fights either when you debuted in the UFC, so you kind of have an understanding of like that approach. Now you go from Bo Nickel,
Yeah.
who's this grappler, to Abdul Alhasssan, who is this power brawler striker. Am I describing him right to you?
Yeah, man, he's a beast. He throws heat. He's kill or be killed. I remember the first ever UFC live event I went to. He was on the card. He fought. I wasn't even fighting. I don't even think I'd had an amateur fight at the time. He fought Sabah Humasi, slept him, and it was the weird one in Michigan where then they're like, "All right, we got to run it back." It was a bad stoppage, and then he slept him again. So, yeah, super dangerous opponent, a real vet. He's been in the sport. His 12th fight in the UFC, but he's been in the UFC for since 2017, maybe a little bit before. So, he's been around, and yeah, I got a lot of respect for the dude. I think you have to respect his power. You have to respect his resume. But yeah, it's a completely different fight than I just had. But that's all good, man. I have a lot of good training partners, and I'm excited to get in there again quick. You know me, like you've been. I feel like I've been talking to you for a long time, and I try to stay as active as I can, bro. I love fighting. I love training. So getting a quick turnaround was definitely exciting, and in my hometown. So that's dope.
For sure, man. Yeah, this is your 10th UFC fight, man. It's like a milestone.
It's pretty crazy, man. I got in at 6-1. And just so I've had more fights in the UFC than I had outside of it, and I only got in 2021, so it's only been a little less than 3 years. We've just been cranking them out. Uh, but yeah, man, I'm pretty proud of that. I feel like I've had my ups and downs, but to get to double digits in the UFC is not something a lot of people do. To get past your first contract is something not a lot of people do. So um, I'm happy for that, and it's hopefully not even close to being done, but it's been cool getting to this point.
Yeah, one thing I noticed about like the last fight and maybe even before that one is that you've matured and you're embracing like fighting more. I don't know how to describe it. It's just like talking to you. It seems like you're more relaxed than you were in the past.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like, I'm a pretty emotional dude, and I'll get pretty anxious and nervous, and I think nerves are good, but they got to be healthy nerves, man. They got to keep you sharp, not kind of be a detriment. And my first few fights in the UFC, I feel like I was scared, like almost fighting scared a little bit. And I don't really have that anymore. I feel like I have more tools in my toolbox. I feel like a big part of that is that this last year, I've really focused on my defense. And if you can be defensively sound, that takes a lot of fear out of it. Um, but I'm also, I feel lucky and blessed that I get to do this. And, uh, I feel like that's a big part of it too, is being grateful and happy and I do all the work. So I can't really fault myself for results. I've made some bad decisions in fights that cost me fights, but I've never lost a fight because I didn't put in the work. And so I can be at peace with that. And it makes it easier to enjoy what I'm doing. Which I mean, I love what I'm doing. And it's a short time, it might be 10 years you get to do it, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not a long time. So I'm just trying to enjoy it more. And I think that's been a big reason for more maturity, more composure, better perspective. Um, and just more fun in general, So it's been good.
I think that going through that pay-per-view grind, it helped a lot, right?
Yeah, man, it was interesting to see how the other half lives, right? Like, uh, hopefully I get back there
Sure.
one day. I got to put some streaks together, but yeah, it was cool,
Sure.
man, and yeah, it was an experience that I'll remember, for a long time, and kind of just showed me, how to be a professional, even more so, right? Like once you get to the UFC, you're like, man, I got to do a lot. I got to do a bunch of interviews. I got to do this, and then you get a fight like that, and it's a whole different kind of
Yeah.
grind. So, that's the goal for everyone, I think, to get to something like that, and like I said, hopefully we get back there.
For sure. And you're fighting at home in Denver, my house, Mile High City, right? So you've seen people when they come into the gym that are not from Denver and train for the first week or two. You know what effect that has on somebody, right? That's not used to the climate.
Yeah, for sure, it's definitely an adjustment, and it's kind of weird. Like Razak was training in Denver, right, for his last few fights, but I don't know this, right? Like I'm not in his camp. I don't know, but I think he's back in Dallas and with his original team, and then he's gonna come out here for the fight. I don't know what his plans are, but it just kind of seemed like a wild move to go from elevation to sea level when you're fighting at elevation, because it's an adjustment and it's hard. You can't really acclimate unless you come out like a month before. You can't really acclimate. No one can really do that. I remember when my wife fought here, we came out 2 weeks before, and it was still, quite a process. So yeah, it's interesting, and that's part of the reason they say that they don't like doing fights in Denver is because they can't get people to sign to fight because they don't want to come to elevation.
Hey, sometimes you don't get to choose where you fight, man. It's just they give you a fight, you gotta take it.
Yeah, that's it 99% of the time, bro. If they offer you a fight, you better say yes.
For sure. And getting ready for a guy like this, I feel like you faced similar style, not the same, but kind of like a similar attributes in the past. And one comes to mind, Trayshawn Gore.
Yeah, Trayshawn was similar. I think Dolce was pretty similar. Guys that are very explosive, fast twitch, got that knockout power. I think the biggest thing in a fight like that is you just got to stay composed, right? You got to stick to, and you got to be defensively sound, and those two things kind of go together. You can't get overwhelmed. If those guys overwhelm you, you're in big trouble. You just got to stay composed uh, and all those guys like in the cage, they thrive on being the bully, right? So the only way you can really beat a bully is you gotta bully them, and so I don't know. Like everyone keeps telling me, like, man, you just got to be careful first round. And while I agree, I'm not disagreeing. I feel like the same thing for all my opponents. You got to be careful first round. So while I'm aware of the danger, I'm also like, man, I'm a finisher too, and I scrap. I'm kill or be killed as well. And so I think it's going to be a super exciting fight for the fans. Um, I know I'll be prepared, and Yeah, man, I'm excited. It's gonna be a fun one for sure.
Yeah, you're right. You have to be careful in the first round. All your finishes are first round finishes in the UFC. I didn't even know that. I didn't remember that like that, but it is true.
Yeah. Yeah, and I finished, I think, out of all my wins, I finished all of them but one, I think.
Yeah,
So, I'm a big finisher too. This kid is, I
yeah.
am. So, I don't think it goes the distance, that's for
It's
sure.
definitely fun. What with camp, man? Anything different about this one, or is it just same as usual?
Not kind of business as usual. I've been working a lot with Rob. He's fighting Josh Silveira, and I can kind of give him a pretty good look for that. And he's a big scary dude, throws heat, so it's a pretty good look for me as well. And it's funny, we just beat the hell out of each other and then go grill out afterwards. He's one of my good friends, so he's always at my house. But it's been a good camp, man. Factory X is a great place. We have great leadership. Um, a lot of people. We have three people on this card. So everybody being in camp's been nice, and um, yeah, pretty much business as usual though.
But it's got to be good to not like having nobody fly. You know what I mean? Anywhere you could just
Oh yeah,
go
I
drive
think
to the spot.
yeah, and like I can be around my girls. Like I always miss my daughters, and some people are like, "God, leave the kids at home when you go to war," but I'm not really that way, man. I love being around my kids. They keep me grounded, and they remind me like no matter what, my worst case is this dude knocks me out in front of everybody, but then I can go home to my kids and my wife, and my life's not really that much different. Like my bank account's a little different, but my life's not that much different, right? And I always joke, my kids think I'm undefeated. I just lie to them. I don't let them watch the fight. So
Even this one, nobody's gonna be at the fights.
nah, my wife will be there. My parents are coming into town, but they don't really like going to the fights either. I think it stresses them out too much, so they're gonna stay at home with the girls, and we'll go back afterwards. But yeah, I don't know, man. People always ask me like, "You gonna bring your girls? You gonna bring your daughters?" And I'm like, "Nah, I don't think so." I think I got scarred. I watched Mark Coleman. He brought his girls when he was fighting in Ryzen. He got the absolute shit kicked out of him, and then his girls are like bawling, like, "We thought you were dead, Dad." He's like, "I'm okay." Both his eyes are like swollen shut. I'm like, dude, I'm not ever putting my kids through that. They're young, so they wouldn't even really remember it anyway. But even as they get older, I'm like, I don't really think they don't need to come see that. It don't do nothing good for them really to see it. I'll let them catch the replay when they know that I'm or when I know that I'm not too hurt.
Um, this one, man, I think a lot of people expect the first round to be fast. You know what I mean? A lot of big, heavy shots. You know what I mean? Both ways, not just like him throwing them. You're gonna be throwing them
Yeah,
too. We know you can. What are your
yeah.
visions of this fight?
I think it's surviving the early storm a little bit. Not just surviving, but being, like I said, being composed, hanging in there, mixing in my game a little bit, and like I always laugh. If you go watch all my fights in the UFC, you probably couldn't really break down what I am as a fighter, how I am as a fighter. They've all been so different. Like I was joking with someone today, like if you're watching film on me, you're like, I don't know what the hell this kid's gonna do. Like he jumps guillotines, he pulls guard, he throws heat, he wrestles. I've done a little bit of everything. So I think just stay composed and defensively sound early. I feel like one being an elevation, and two just in general, I feel like I have the cardio advantage. Um, and just mixing in all the martial arts. I've kind of got away from my wrestling. People forget that's kind of my background. But I think that is one area that I have a big advantage in, and I feel like nothing drains the gas tank quicker than good wrestling and mixing of the martial arts. And so I think that's going to be a key. Um, but yeah, I think just as long as I stay composed and don't get outside myself, I feel like it's a good fight for me, and that's what I keep envisioning. I don't really know. I think there'll be a finish. I don't see this fight going 15 minutes. Neither of us are guys that go 15 minutes, so I don't see that happening. But I haven't really pictured a finish. I haven't really pictured that. I've just pictured myself being super composed, mixing the martial arts, and finding a way to get it done.
All right, man. A couple more questions about the middleweight division. You know what I mean? Because since you're a middleweight, I gotta ask you. Sean Strickland.
Oh
He
yeah.
just beat Paulo Costa, and now he's saying he's gonna sit out until he gets a title shot. Which, whenever you hear a fighter say that, you're like, are you really trying to battle with the UFC? You know what I mean? Like, it's a
Yeah.
tough thing.
Can never be me, bro.
Yeah. Like, what do you think of this?
Yeah, and also just him in general, like I feel like that dude will go crazy if he doesn't have a fight, you know. So I think that's kind of a losing battle because the UFC, even if they would give him a title shot, they might be like, you got to wait a year or whatever, depending on what they're going to do with, I don't know who they're going to do next. They might do DDP and Izzy next. They might do whatever. So and then the division moves super fast. So like, okay, I'm gonna sit out for a title shot. Well, if Hamzat beats Rob, like you're not getting the next title shot. They're gonna definitely do Hamzat next, try to capitalize on that. So it's like you just kind of screw yourself a little bit. I get it, you gotta like you're a businessman. I don't know what he's making. Hopefully he's making good money. If he's thinking he could sit out, he must be making good money. But I think, sometimes I feel like the UFC is gonna just prove a point. Like, okay, sit out. That's fine, right? Like even the guys that have been rewarded, quote unquote, for sitting out, usually it's like 18 months before they fight for the belt. Like when Tyron Woodley sat all those times, sat to fight Robbie Lawler. It was like 18 months before he got to fight for the belt. So, if you can sustain it, if you got good enough investments, if you have good enough money on your paychecks that you can do it, sure, man, but that's definitely the minority.
Yeah, sitting out that long, it's like missing 2, 3 seasons in a pro league. You know what I mean? Like it's a long time.
Yeah. And it's also like this sport has such a, like look at the stat. I saw the stat the other day. It was like at 35 and older, your chances of winning the title are dramatically decreased. Sitting out, you're just getting older, and a lot of times, like, you're not even really saving yourself, and him especially, you're not even saving yourself the damage, because he's sparring every day at training. So it's not even like he's really saving himself the damage by sitting out and waiting. Because when he says sitting out and waiting, all that means is that he's gonna keep training every day and just hope eventually they're gonna give him the fight. So I don't love it. I would lose my mind. I gotta fight, man. And I feel like he's kind of built that same way. Uh, so that sounds good to say, but we'll see, I guess.
Well, you mentioned DDP and Izzy, and DDP did an interview and he said the UFC needs to announce his next fight, and most likely it's going to be against Izzy, right? And it's going to be most likely in
Yeah,
the summer, right? They're going to probably put it in some pay per view in the summertime. What do you think of that
that's
fight?
pretty
Yeah,
interesting,
what do you
huh?
think of that fight? And why do you think it's
I
interesting?
think it's weird. I think it's weird. I think it'll be a good fight, but I think it's weird. I think it's Izzy's coming off a loss, right? And Sean didn't get an immediate rematch, but Izzy's getting an immediate rematch against the guy who didn't beat him for the title. So to me, I don't know if that's ever been done in the UFC. I'm sure it has, but it seems weird. I know that's the money fight to make, especially I mean, depending on where they're gonna announce it. If like they're going to Africa, it makes a ton of sense, I guess. I know that was kind of in their plans last year, so that would make more sense to me if they're like, yeah, we're going to South Africa, we're gonna do this thing in Johannesburg or whatever, and that makes sense. But if they're just doing it in Vegas, to me, I'm kind of like, I get it's a big pay per view, people want to see it. There's a little heat there, but and I don't even want to say like Izzy doesn't deserve it because that's a weird thing to say because he was such a dominant champion, but it's like, man, he also lost the belt to Pereira. He also, what I mean? Like, it wasn't like he just lost the belt and then went on this long streak. Like, he lost the belt, won the belt, lost the belt. So it's like, is that the guy that we give the immediate rematch against a guy who never beat him before, lost to before? So I don't know. I guess it doesn't really concern me, but if I was a top five middleweight, I might be like, wait a second. Like, if I was Sean, I would be like, yeah, man, this doesn't make sense. I should fight for the belt next. But it is what it is, I guess. That it's all about the dollar
What
signs.
do you think stylistically though? Who do you think has the advantage in this fight?
Ah, man, I think honestly, before Sean and Dricus fought, I would have said Izzy for sure. But I do think Izzy kind of struggles a little bit with guys that aren't super technical. As goofy as that sounds, like he like if you've ever done like open class, if you've trained a little bit and you've done like open classes with guys who don't really train that much, but they do it for fun, those people are almost harder to deal with than people that will react the right way. Like if I faint, I expect you to react a certain way. And then when you don't react that way, I'm kind of like, oh shit, like what do I do from here? And I feel like that was kind of the struggle he had with Sean a little bit. Sean was a very awkward, different style, and DDP is similar, but with better wrestling. So, I could see DDP taking him down, doing some work on the ground. He's a big, strong dude at 85. And then I also think his like herky jerky spastic style is and blitzing style is a little tough because he doesn't blitz like Robert Whitaker. He's like super long when he blitzes, and I think Izzy some trouble. With all that being said, I still think Izzy is one of the best 85ers. He's at one of the best gyms, has what's the best coaches. Like, he will be prepared for that. So I think he can get it done for sure. I do think it's going to be an interesting fight, though. I don't think it's going to be one-sided either way. Definitely be a back and forth fight. Maybe Izzy early, right? Or maybe, excuse me, Dricus early, because it's going to be so weird for Izzy to catch the timing. But the longer the fight goes, probably better for Izzy.
All right, man, Denver, you're back in action, back at home, July 13th. Cody, it's always good catching up, and thank you so much, man, for always taking the time. And it is what it is. All the best to you, man.
Hell yeah, bro! You're one of the OGs, man. I always got to kick it with you.